How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. Picture this. A doctor just told you that you have months, maybe weeks, left on this earth. Cancer. The word alone feels like a punch to the gut. But it's not just the physical pain that haunts you. There's something worse lurking beneath the surface. A creeping, suffocating dread. Not just about dying itself, but about everything you're leaving behind. Depression rolls in like a heavy fog, draining the color from your final days, stealing away any sense of meaning. This was Patrick Metis, reality back in 2010. At 53, this television news director was fighting a rare bile duct cancer. The chemo was hell, and the knowledge that he probably wouldn't make it? Even worse. His wife Lisa watched as fear consumed him from the inside out. Then came that Monday morning. Patrick stumbled across an article that would flip his entire world upside down. Scientists at New York University were doing something that sounded absolutely crazy. They were giving dying cancer patients a massive dose of psilocybin. Yes, the stuff in magic mushrooms. They wanted to see if this powerful compound could help people face their mortality without falling apart. Now, to most people, this sounds completely insane. Why would anyone in their most fragile moments voluntarily mess with their mind and stare death in the face? Lisa certainly thought it was a terrible idea. She wanted him to keep fighting, not take what seemed like an escape route. But Patrick saw something different. He saw a lifeline. So he picked up the phone and volunteered. What happened next is part of a bigger story that's completely rewriting our understanding of the human mind. Because after that single psychedelic journey, Patrick found something incredible. Not a cure for his cancer, obviously, but a cure for his terror. He came back transformed. Lisa said he was on fire, absolutely radiant. He told her he had touched the face of God. And for his last 17 months on Earth, he lived with a peace, a joy, an acceptance that not only changed his own death, but touched everyone around him. How on earth is that possible? How can one experience triggered by a molecule from a fungus so completely transform someone's relationship with life and death? This is the question that pulled Michael Pollan, one of our most respected journalists, on a journey he never saw coming. Known for his deep dives into food, farming, and nature, Pollan was a die-hard skeptic. He believed the physical world was all there was, nothing mystical, nothing supernatural. But stories like Patrick's kept piling up, stories of healing and transformation that science couldn't easily dismiss. So on the edge of his 60th birthday, Pollan decided to do what he does best, investigate. But this time, the investigation wouldn't just happen in libraries or laboratories. It would happen inside his own mind. The book that emerged from this journey, How to Change Your Mind, has sold millions of copies and become a landmark in our understanding of consciousness. It's about science, history, and healing, sure. But more than that, it's about discovering a hidden door in the familiar room of your own mind, a door you've probably never noticed. And on the other side, a completely different way of experiencing reality. Today we're going to open that door together. By the time we're done, you'll understand the buried history of a scientific revolution that was suppressed for half a century. You'll discover what cutting-edge neuroscience is revealing about the mysteries of consciousness. And most importantly, you'll see how changing your mind might just be the key to changing your life. Our story doesn't actually begin in the 1960s like you'd expect. It starts in a quiet Swiss laboratory during the darkest days of World War II. A chemist named Albert Hofmann was working for the pharmaceutical company Sandoz, studying a fungus called ergot that grows on rye grain. For centuries, people knew ergot as a poison that could cause madness and convulsions if you ate contaminated bread. But midwives also used it to help with childbirth. Hoffman was hunting for a compound that could help with circulation. In 1938, he created the 25th molecule in his series lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD-25. The animal tests were underwhelming, so he shelved it. And there it sat for 5 whole years. Then, on a spring day in 1943, Hoffman felt this strange, inexplicable urge to take another look at this forgotten molecule. While working with it, he must have absorbed a tiny amount through his fingertips. He started feeling dizzy and weird, so he decided to head home. Because of wartime restrictions, he had to bicycle, and on that now legendary bike ride across Basel, reality started to bend. Familiar objects twisted into grotesque, threatening shapes. The world sparkled and glistened like it had just been created. At home, lying on his couch with his eyes closed, he saw an uninterrupted stream of fantastic pictures, extraordinary shapes with intense, kaleidoscopic colors. This was the world's very first acid trip, and the only one ever taken with absolutely zero expectations. A few days later, wanting to confirm what had happened, Hoffman intentionally dosed himself with what he thought was an extremely small amount, 250 micrograms. He had no idea that LSD is one of the most powerful psychoactive compounds on Earth, active at just a fraction of that dose. This trip was terrifying. He felt certain he was losing his mind. A demon had possessed him, taking over his body, mind, and soul. He saw his own corpse lying on the sofa. Yet when the doctor arrived, his vital signs were completely normal. Hoffman emerged from this experience, convinced he'd stumbled onto something monumentally important. He thought LSD could revolutionize psychiatry, maybe by letting therapists temporarily experience what their schizophrenic patients went through. He called it his "child," but believed it could be spiritual medicine for a world disconnected from nature. Sandoz didn't know what to make of this bizarre compound. So they did something remarkable. They gave it away for free to any legitimate researcher or therapist who wanted it. They hoped someone would figure out what it was good for. And for about 15 years, from the early 1950s to the mid-1960s, a quiet revolution in psychiatry unfolded. This was the first wave of psychedelic research. Thousands of papers were published. Researchers found that LSD and psilocybin, the compound in certain mushrooms, were helping with all sorts of conditions: alcoholism, depression, end-of-life anxiety. Some of psychiatry's best minds considered them miracle drugs. One of the most promising areas was treating alcoholism. In Saskatchewan, Canada, 2 psychiatrists named Humphrey Osmond and Abram Hoffer had a fascinating insight. They noticed that alcoholics often got sober only after hitting rock bottom, typically through a terrifying hallucinatory episode during withdrawal called delirium tremens, or the DTs. They wondered, could a controlled high dose of LSD create a therapeutic version of this experience, shocking someone into sobriety? They tested this on hundreds of alcoholics, and the results were stunning. About half the time the treatment worked. But when they interviewed the patients, they discovered something unexpected. The patients weren't describing terrifying madness. Instead, many described something closer to a spiritual awakening, a mystical experience. They felt a sense of oneness with the world, a fresh perspective that made their addiction seem small and insignificant. This was radical. It wasn't the chemical itself doing the healing, but the experience the chemical made possible. This idea spread like wildfire. Even Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, tried LSD in the 1950s. He was convinced it could help others achieve the spiritual awakening that had saved him from his own alcoholism, an awakening that few people realize was itself triggered by a psychedelic-like experience with the plant belladonna. Hollywood caught on too. Stars like Cary Grant underwent LSD therapy. He gave interviews, saying it had stripped away his ego, made him a better actor, and helped him find peace. He declared himself born again. All across North America, from Canada to Los Angeles to New York, researchers were building a body of knowledge, figuring out the best ways to guide these powerful experiences. They were pioneers, mapping a new frontier of consciousness. At the center of this network was a character so improbable he sounds fictional. His name was Al Hubbard. Known as Captain Trips, he was a former bootlegger, spy, and uranium millionaire who, after claiming to have a vision from an angel, became the Johnny Appleseed of LSD. With a third-grade education and a satchel full of Sandoz LSD, Hubbard believed his mission was to turn on the world's leaders from the top down. He introduced an estimated 6,000 people to LSD, executives, politicians, philosophers, and artists. Hubbard perfected many of the therapeutic protocols still used today. He understood instinctively that sterile hospital rooms were all wrong for psychedelic journeys. He brought in comfortable couches, flowers, art, and music. He knew the guide's role was to create a safe container, a space of trust where someone could let go and surrender to the experience. For a while, it seemed this new science was about to change the world. And then it all came crashing down. The story most people know revolves around one name, Timothy Leary. When Leary, a charismatic psychology lecturer at Harvard, first tried psilocybin mushrooms in Mexico in 1960, he was actually late to the party. He returned to Harvard, a transformed man, a prophet. He famously declared he'd learned more in 4 hours by a swimming pool than in 15 years as a psychologist. He and his colleague, Richard Alpert, launched the Harvard Psilocybin Project. At first, they tried playing by the rules, conducting experiments like the famous Good Friday experiment, which showed that psilocybin could reliably trigger mystical experiences in divinity students. But Leary wasn't interested in the slow, careful work of science. He'd had a vision. He believed these substances were too important to be confined to laboratories or limited to the sick. They were for everyone. They were the key to cultural and spiritual revolution. His message was simple, and to a generation facing the Cold War and Vietnam it was electric. Turn on, tune in, drop out. The older generation of researchers, people like Humphrey Osmond and Al Hubbard, watched in horror. They'd been working carefully, building legitimacy, trying to integrate these powerful tools into medicine. Leary, they felt, was throwing it all away with his publicity stunts and calls for mass consumption without proper guidance. Hubbard, the ex-spy, reportedly got so furious he considered shooting Leary. The media, which had once been fascinated by these stories of bad trips, psychotic breaks, and suicides filled the headlines. LSD went from psychiatric miracle to public menace, destroyer of young minds. The backlash was swift and total. By 1966, Sandoz stopped distributing LSD. The government banned these substances, classifying them as Schedule I, meaning high potential for abuse, and no accepted medical use. Research ground to a halt. The first wave had crashed. An entire body of knowledge, a decade of promising research and clinical experience, was effectively erased. It was as if it had never happened. The door to this realm of consciousness was slammed shut, locked, and the key was thrown away. And for nearly 30 years, that's where the story ended. But then something unexpected happened. Beginning in the 1990s, quietly and out of public view, a small group of scientists and psychonauts decided that something precious had been lost, and they were determined to get it back. This is the story of the Renaissance, and it's where Michael Pollan, the skeptical journalist, found himself swept up. By his 50s, Pollan had a comfortable life, a happy marriage, a successful career. He'd developed, as he puts it, a set of reliable mental algorithms for navigating the world. But he started hearing whispers of this new research. At Johns Hopkins, a highly respected psychopharmacologist named Roland Griffiths was giving psilocybin to terminal cancer patients. Griffiths was the last person you'd expect to get involved with psychedelics. He was a straight-arrow scientist who'd spent his career studying drug dependence. But a personal, mystical experience during meditation had left him feeling his scientific work was empty. He was on the verge of quitting to go to an ashram in India. Then a colleague introduced him to Bob Jesse, a former tech executive from Oracle, who'd had his own transformative psychedelic experience. Jesse had made it his mission to revive psychedelic science, not just as medicine, but as a tool for spiritual development. Together, Griffiths, Jesse, and a therapist named Bill Richards, a veteran from the 1960s research, designed a landmark experiment. In 2006, they published a paper with a shocking title for a scientific journal. Psilocybin can occasion mystical-type experiences, having substantial and sustained personal meaning and spiritual significance. They gave psilocybin to healthy volunteers who'd never used psychedelics. The volunteers lay on couches, wearing eye shades and listening to music. 2/3 rated the experience among the top 5 most spiritually significant of their lives. 1/3 ranked it as the single most significant. Months later, they reported lasting improvements in well-being and life satisfaction. This paper cracked the ice. It showed this research could be done safely and rigorously. It opened the door for a new generation of scientists. And it opened a door in Michael Pollan's mind. He was skeptical. As a materialist, he believed matter was all there is. But he was curious. Was it possible that a single experience, triggered by a pill, could change someone's worldview? Could it actually change your mind? He decided he had to find out for himself. But the official trials weren't accepting, quote, healthy normals anymore. If he wanted this experience, he'd have to go underground. This led him to a hidden world of guides and therapists who've been continuing the work in secret for decades. These aren't reckless hippies, but professionals, psychologists, doctors, even ministers, who risk their licenses and freedom because they believe so strongly in the healing power of these substances. Pollan's journey is the heart of the book. He takes us with him on 3 trips, each with a different guide and molecule. His first journey is with LSD. The guide is a man named Fritz, a German therapist living off the grid in the mountains, son of a former Nazi SS officer. Pollan's nervous. But the experience isn't what he expected. Instead of cosmic fireworks or terrifying demons, he finds himself on a deeply emotional journey through his own life and relationships. He sees his life with his wife Judith as a beautiful wooden structure being built, level by level, into the sky. He feels a flood of compassion for his father, seeing him not just as a parent but as a son with his own struggles. He weeps for a 4th-grade music teacher he and his friends used to torment, suddenly understanding the man's passion and their casual cruelty. What floods through him, above all, is love. Love for his family, his friends, people he barely remembers. He realizes with the force of revelation that he's been stingy with his feelings. It's an experience that opens his heart. It's psychedelic, mind-loosening, rather than world-shattering. He returns feeling more open, more present, more appreciative. For a few days he feels an afterglow, a pleasant light over everything. But it fades. He's disappointed it wasn't more transformative. He decides he needs to go deeper. His second journey is with Psilocybin. The guide is a woman named Mary, who works in a shamanic tradition. She has him eat a large dried mushroom, one bite at a time. This time, the dose is higher. The journey begins in a dark, digital, computer-generated world. It's sleek and beautiful, but lifeless and alienating. He feels trapped. Anxiety builds. Then the booster dose kicks in, and his self, the I he's known for 60 years, begins falling apart. First, he becomes a sheaf of post-it notes, scattered to the wind. Then he's spread over the landscape like a thin layer of butter. His ego, the voice in his head that worries and plans and defends, is just gone. And what's left isn't a void, but pure, disembodied awareness. A calm, neutral observer watching the scene of its own dissolution with benign indifference. There is life after the death of the ego. This, he feels, is big news. This is the mystical experience. He finally understands what the cancer patients were talking about. From this vantage point, outside the prison of the self, even death can be viewed with equanimity. The journey takes a darker turn. He looks in a mirror and sees his face as a skull, which morphs into his deceased grandfather's face. He's taken on a tour of the unmourned dead in his life. He feels grief, but no fear. Then Mary puts on music, Bach's second cello suite. In that moment, the music becomes everything. He's no longer listening to the cello. He is the cello. He feels the bow's friction on his skin. He passes into the resonant black well of space inside the instrument. He dissolves into the sound, a pure stream of worldly beauty. And in that merging, the fear of death loses its sting. He's had a kind of practice run for dying, for letting go. His final journey is the most extreme. It's with a substance so powerful and obscure it's known simply as the toad. It's smoked venom from the Sonoran desert toad, containing a molecule called 5-MeO-DMT. The experience lasts only 30 minutes. But in those 30 minutes, the universe is unmade. He inhales vapor from a glass pipe, and before he can even exhale, he's gone. It's not a journey, it's an explosion. He describes it as being strapped to the outside of a rocket at launch, G-forces pulling his face into a grimace as the roar becomes all-consuming. His I is annihilated. But this time, even the calm, disembodied observer is consumed in what he can only describe as pure terror. It's the Big Bang run in reverse. Reality collapses, dimension by dimension, until nothing's left. No time, no space, no self, no being. Only the roar. It's horrible. And then, just as suddenly, it reverses. Reality begins reconstituting itself. Time and space return. His body reassembles. His eye slips back on like an old pair of slippers. What follows is a wave of pure ecstasy, the pleasure that comes from the cessation of unbearable pain. He's alive. And with that comes overwhelming gratitude. Not just for being alive, but for the very fact of being. The miracle that there's something rather than nothing. He emerges from these three journeys a different person. The staunch materialist is no more. He's not sure what lies beyond the material world, but he's certain his accounts with reality were closed prematurely. The mind, he now knows, is vaster than he ever imagined. But the question remains, what was actually happening in his brain? This is where the new science offers its most stunning revelations. Robin Carhart-Harris, a young neuroscientist at Imperial College London, has been using modern brain imaging tools to watch what happens to the brain on psychedelics. He expected to see brain activity increase. Instead, he saw it decrease, and the decrease was concentrated in one network, the default mode network, or DMN. The DMN is fascinating. Only discovered in 2001, it's the network that's active when we're not focused on any external task. It's where our minds wander, where we ruminate and worry and time travel to past and future. It's also what generates our sense of self, our ego. Neuroscientists sometimes call it the me network. The DMN acts like the brain's conductor or corporate executive. It sits at the top of a hierarchy, keeping order, filtering reality, and enforcing our habitual thinking patterns. What Carhart-Harris discovered is that under psychedelics, the default mode network goes quiet. The conductor leaves the stage. And when that happens, two extraordinary things occur. First, the ego temporarily dissolves. The sharp boundary between self and world, subject and object, melts away. This is the neural basis of the mystical experience of oneness. Second, the rest of the brain starts talking to itself in new and unusual ways. Regions that don't normally communicate form thousands of new connections. The brain becomes less specialized and more globally interconnected. It's like a society where the rigid hierarchies dissolve for a day and everyone's free to talk to everyone else. This temporary rewiring can create synesthesia, where you see sounds or feel colors. It allows for fresh ideas, new perspectives, and creative insights. It's what Pollan calls shaking the snow globe. Carhart-Harris has a theory he calls the entropic brain. He suggests mental health depends on balancing order and disorder, or entropy. Some mental illnesses, like depression, addiction, and obsession, aren't from lack of order, but an excess of it. The mind gets stuck in rigid, destructive thought loops, sleds going down the same deep grooves in the snow, over and over. Psychedelics, by temporarily increasing entropy and flattening the snow, can act as a reset. They disrupt those rigid patterns, creating a window of flexibility where new, healthier patterns can form. This aligns with developmental psychologist Alison Gopnik's work. She argues that children's consciousness is much like adults on psychedelics. Children are tripping all the time. Their brains are more connected, their attention less focused, they're more open to possibilities. They're the research and development department of humanity. As we grow up, our brains get pruned and become lean, efficient acting machines. We trade the open, exploratory consciousness of childhood for the focused, goal-oriented consciousness of adulthood. Psychedelics, then, may offer a way to temporarily return to that more plastic, more open state. They let us briefly escape the tyranny of the ego and the rigid thought habits it enforces. And this brings us back to healing. For cancer patients, ego dissolution can provide a new perspective from which to view life and death, reducing fear and increasing acceptance. For addicts, it can break the obsessive story they tell themselves, "I'm a smoker and I'm powerless," and offer a glimpse of a larger identity, making the addiction seem small and unimportant. For depressed people, it can jolt the brain out of endless loops of rumination and self-criticism, allowing them to reconnect with their feelings, with other people, with the world. The promise of psychedelic therapy isn't that a chemical will fix you, it's that it can create a state of mind where you can begin to fix yourself. It opens a window, but you, with a guide's help, have to do the work of rewiring your own mind. So what do we take from this extraordinary journey into the mind? At its core, How to Change Your Mind isn't just about drugs. It's about consciousness itself. It reminds us that what we call normal waking consciousness isn't the only way to experience reality. It's just one channel on a television with infinite channels. Most of the time, we're locked on that one channel because it helps us survive, get things done, navigate daily life, but it's not the whole picture. The book suggests we might all benefit from what you could call neural diversity. Just as biodiversity is crucial for ecosystem health, a diversity of conscious states might be crucial for mental health. There are times when our default consciousness, with its vigilant ego and well-worn mental habits, isn't the best tool for the job. Times when we need to be more open, more creative, less defended. Times when we need to feel connection or awe rather than separation. Psychedelics are one way to access these other states, but not the only way. Meditation, breathing exercises, fasting, sensory deprivation, or even overwhelming experiences in nature can also quiet the ego and open the mind. The great gift of the psychedelic experience, Pollan suggests, is that it can give us a glimpse of these other states, a taste of what's possible, which we can then learn to cultivate in daily life. It expands our repertoire of conscious states. The most profound lesson for me is the reevaluation of the ego. We live in a culture that celebrates the self. We're taught to build a strong ego, defend it, promote it. But what if the ego, this terrible master, is also the source of so much suffering? What if the constant chatter of the self is what walls us off from true connection, from joy, from the wonder hiding in plain sight all around us? Spiritual traditions have been telling us this for millennia. The path to peace lies in transcending the self. What's remarkable is that modern neuroscience is now arriving at the same conclusion in its own way. It has located the ego's seat in the brain and found that when that seat goes quiet, a more expansive, generous, and connected way of being can emerge. This doesn't mean we should all run out and take psychedelics. These are powerful substances that demand respect, and they're not for everyone. The importance of a safe setting and experienced guide can't be overstated. But what this book does, with such brilliance and courage, is reopen a conversation that was silenced for far too long. It invites us to be more curious and less fearful about the mysteries of our own minds. It suggests that sometimes the most radical and transformative act we can perform is simply to change our minds. That was the book summary of How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. We've touched on the major themes today, but I'll be completely honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the layout, the major cities, the rivers, but it can never replace actually walking the land yourself. The real magic of this book is in the nuance, the personal stories, and the quiet moments of reflection that only come from reading it. This summary is meant to be a guide, to help you decide if this is a journey you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, or resonated with a question you've been asking yourself, I urge you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts. It's an experience that could genuinely change how you see yourself, your mind, and the world around you. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It tells us we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep opening our minds and growing together.